And we are live with Dr. Charles Cole. It's a good morning. Thank you, Dr. Cole, for coming on short notice. I appreciate it,
brother. I'm glad to be here, man. You on your way to being the new you about to be that guy in education media. So I'm proud to be here. You Ed Bradley. That's
the Ed Bradley.
Huh? I call you the education Ed Bradley.
I'll take it. I'll take Ed Bradley's bank account. That's what I'll take. I'll take his bank account. I appreciate it. You coming on this morning. Now, I want to talk a little bit about Black agency. Right now, we're in the time of COVID. Things are uncertain, and we're talking more about crisis-related actions we should take, but we're not really thinking longer term or thinking bigger than that. Maybe it's an opportunity right now for Black families to exercise the power that we haven't before. But I want to start with this clip. You and I both have seen this clip. I think it's important just to take a quick look at it and talk about what you call, now let me get it right. I call it the white tax in another way, in another discussion. What do you call it in discussion?
I officially call it the Black Achievement Trauma Tax.
Jeez. That's a lot, brother.
You're about to see every bit of that title in this clip.
All right. I feel like the old guy. Give me a second here.
Oh, you're good, man. That's the beauty of having something live too. You know what I'm saying?
Give me a second here. I'll get it all played for you. Oh, I see you were telling me earlier about how to make it full screen too.
Yeah, I got you, man.
I appreciate that. I appreciate that. Tell people the name of your book so that we can start out with that, because I usually try and do that up front too.
Yeah, no, it's all good, man. My book is called Beyond Grit and Resilience. And it's basically a study on exactly what we're about to talk about. It's looking at Black men that grew up dealing with acute trauma, not like the way in which we kind of misuse trauma now, where anything that makes you uncomfortable, but like actual acute traumas. And they went on to become doctors and super successful in life. And then we explore how they got there, but also the residual impacts of that, which we call the Black Achievement Trauma Tax. And you found like this amazing clip of this magnificent young man that, I really want us to look at and like really break down the tape like we on ESPN, because it was that impactful when I saw it.
All right.
Hi.
I don't know if you guys can hear this. Tell me if you can hear it.
I'm Freeman, a current student at Warren G. Harding. And I'm not doing okay.
Can you hear him?
I can hear it. So
okay,
yeah.
Good. All right.
I just hear you clicking down.
Not even close, really. There's a lot of pressure and anxiety, just a lot of weight on my shoulders right now because of this pandemic, the coronavirus, and the isolation, and just the fear of what's out there, and all that comes with it. I'm trapped in this house 24/7. And the biggest issue is the pressure that I have to endure trying to complete all of the schoolwork that these teachers pile on top of us. I spent maybe 4 or 5 hours yesterday nonstop doing assignments, and I didn't even put a dent in the amount of work that I have to do. And it's like I have no motivation and no energy to put in really anything. And as the students, we're leaning on one another to complete these assignments, to maintain our grades, because we can't really rely on our teachers. I don't think they understand the gravity, the magnitude of how much pressure this is for us. It's a lot. I can't teach myself physics or college algebra, or it's a lot to just. I'm not hardwired that way. I'm not programmed. I can hardly understand it when I'm learning in class, and now I have to teach myself, and I have to do the assignments, and I have to take these quizzes, and I'm on and they have due dates. I was given 25 assignments this week.
That's crazy as hell.
25 assignments.
That's crazy as hell.
And I don't understand. I've written several emails to the principal, and he's gotten back, and he's tried to be helpful, but the efforts are not enough. I was given tips on how to organize and how to sit down and organize myself to get this work done, and that's not helping me because I don't even have the energy or the motivation to do the work.
So I'm gonna stop there.
Yeah.
Say you can feel this young man's pain, right?
Yeah. I mean,
You can
absolutely.
hear it.
I mean, it takes me back this when I was in school, when I was in high school and college. I remember, I know that feeling that he's talking about viscerally. He's obviously somebody who has, he really values his education. And education plays a really, really high role. So like I say to you, told myself what I told myself to push through, that was that if I don't get this education, I'm going to die. I'm going to live the life that my parents have, that I'm not built for. I'm going to die, right? So, I put kind of stake on my schoolwork or getting or completing because I felt my life was at risk. So you see somebody who is really articulating they need, is saying I'm doing my best, and it's just kind of ridiculous. I think that guy is exerting a whole lot of agency right now.
He is obviously anguished. He is obviously trying to continue doing it and pushing through. And if it wasn't for this showing up on Facebook, this would be a voice that we don't normally hear. This would be a story that doesn't normally get told. But this is what people are living when they are trying to achieve and trying to do their best. Zakia says Charles is a little choppy.
Am I still choppy?
You're not as choppy anymore. Cheryl
Okay.
Kirk says it's tough for a lot of these kids to transition to distance learning. Tamika says, our students, I appreciate him sharing his truth. Now, what I want to say about him sharing this truth is if you go back and you look at this, and if anybody wants or needs the link, just shoot me a message. I'll send you the link because I think we should all watch it and take a look at it and be compassionate about it. But most of the comments are like, I'll pray for you. We got you, supportive and whatnot. But there's a few male comments in there that are like, man up, dude. What are you crying about? It's like the wrong type of response to this situation. And it's possibly why someone like him wouldn't say anything about it. Would just keep enduring it until they break. But I want to go to your book a little bit. So you wrote a book where you and you did research for your doctorate around what you call the achievement tax. And there were multiple stories. There were a few stories that you traveled through in that in your book. In relation to what we're watching here, or whatnot, what is the achievement tax? How did the stories that you looked at, how did they unfold?
Right. So so they unfolded with young men just like this, right? Where it's like they probably, grew up, and I don't know his financial situation, but for the purposes of our conversation, grew up in some really tough situations, right? Our experience in a wide variety of trauma, just all the ACEs or whatever it is that you use, like these determining factors of what kids are struggling of color probably grew up in. But these young people went on to be successful at the highest levels. What the Black Achievement Trauma Tax is, it is the residual, having to pay for the residual impacts of that journey along the way. So it means that this kid is going to work very, very hard and probably get to the level of success that he wants to get to. But there's going to be pent up trauma that he has to deal with later on. It's a social emotional tax that he has to pay for that success that a lot of other people won't have to pay.
So he's going to pay a price for doing well.
Yeah. And he's going to pay it later on in life, right? He's going to pay it like in his 30s and his 40s and his 50s, right? When he is trying to like man his own family or deal with that success, right? Because it's like basically you are trying to reach this goal. And then when you reach it, there was something you believed, right, to get there. It's like, oh, things are going to change once I get to this place, right? And you push a lot of stuff down. But then what you kind of realize at that age is that, oh, I didn't deal with that pain and that trauma along the way. And it doesn't go away. It just goes dormant. And when things go dormant, that means that they will reappear at another time.
So as you're achieving, you as you graduate, and let's say you get into college. Let's say you get into college.
Right.
Let's say you make it through college. You come out the other end. The group of Black people that do what I just said, those couple of things, get smaller and smaller and smaller. Like the number that graduate is a pretty big number.
Right.
The number that get into college is a smaller number. The one that come out the other end with the degree is an even smaller number. And then the one that get a good job, what's considered to be the good job,
Right.
and end up, owning a home and having a family and all that's even a smaller number. And what you were saying is, even with all those markers of success, it's not like you've been made better 100%.
Right. I mean, it socially, emotionally, no, right? Like there's some deep scars. It's some, what it does, what your body does when you get hurt, right? Like it scars over, it scabs, right? And you deal with those like emotional and psychological scabs later on in life. Now, I would still argue that I'd rather deal with those scabs being somewhat successful, doing the things I want to do and being able to raise a family than having to deal with those scabs and still kind of being in the same place that you started as a young person, right? So the reason why I use that population is because I wanted to highlight the highest levels of success that we kind of identify with, right? And I'm saying that if these people are going through this, then what's actually happening to those kids that didn't even reach that level, right? What's happening to those kids that didn't graduate from high school, that's having to figure it out and deal with this stuff? So it was trying to actually go deeper into the story. My subjects are the people at the end of the education movie that you see graduating and walking off into the sunset. And what I wanted to kind of do is say, like those kids not all right either. You know what I'm saying? They become like broken adults, right? And it's like, how do we continue to hold a high bar in education? Because this is not, I don't want people to use my book as an excuse to lower the bar for Black kids. It's saying that be able to walk and chew gum. It's saying be able to teach a young person and also make sure they leave you being whole. And we can do some things to actually help address that.
What are some of the things that you would do to address that?
I think some of the things is making sure that we're checking in on the mental health of even our most successful Black kids at times, right? So this young man is like basically sending out a call for us to react and saying, look, I'm doing everything that society told me I needed to do. I am bootstrapping to the highest degree. I will do your assignments. I will do this stuff. And it's now time for somebody to step in and say, hey, wait a second. Like, I'm gonna help this kid out. Hey man, you're doing a good job. We got you. We love you. Just keep doing what you need to do. And then going to that school and saying, look, this is ridiculous, right? Like we need to like have some type of reprieve for these young people, because this kid is obviously a high achiever. And if he is going through this type of stuff, then what is happening to everybody else, right? So that's how I see that, is that you lower that tax by allowing these young folks to actually feel what they need to feel, by resetting them emotionally, right? Like, okay, he needs a reset, like emotionally, because what's going to happen is, because of who he is and how he determined he is, he got it out and he's going to push that down and he's going to just march on forward. And he's going to push that down. And he's going to march forward, but then he's going to be 35. You know what I mean? And it's like, everything didn't switch emotionally with the success, only like the physical and the things around me switched. And, sometimes you can't control it or contain it up into that level because it doesn't make sense anymore.
Sarah Carpenter says, as Black parents, sometimes we forget to check on the very little people in the house with us. A lot of our parents have a lot going on with themselves. Right. Matthew Nielsen says, are parents seeing work that's new to the kids, because normally teachers would just shuffle them onto the next lesson, unit, grade if they were in school,
right?
Which is also a good question. I mean, is his trauma really just related to COVID, like because he's home and we're doing distance learning?
No. This just helped bring it out, right? It just like he has put so much pressure on himself around what academic attainment is going to mean for him and his family. You know what I mean? Like, think about somebody that's like, you know, whether it's a ball player, a drug dealer, or a hardworking cop or whatever, that's going into dangerous situations, but saying, I'm doing this for my family, I'm doing this for my future. And that's when I say it in those terms, that's a lot of pressure for a 16-year-old, don't you think? Like, can you imagine your sons now, right? Your little babies, right? Like, feeling that type of weight. And if they don't get this thing, right, that not only are they letting you down, right, they're letting down like their entire lineage, you know, that's a lot of pressure to have on yourself as a young person. And we got to like protect people from themselves on some level. But here's the thing that's scary and the reality about it. If he's not that vigilant, he probably doesn't get that level of success. If he doesn't go that hard, because he doesn't have the same safety nets that a lot of other kids have, right? Like, so, you know, it takes a lot of pressure off me. If I had parents, I could say, hey, stay home while you figure it out, or hey, take a gap year, right, and go backpack through Europe, right? That's a very different existence from, if I don't get to college, I'm gonna like start doing some illegal stuff because these jobs, I don't have no jobs out here to make good money to take care of my family, and that's a lot of pressure that people feel.
Do you see his parent going up to the school complaining about the amount of work that he's doing?
I think so. I think he has an advocate because there was an adult in the background of that, listening to that, and like I feel like somebody pushed him to get that emotion out, right? And I feel like it was a Black woman behind him. We could hear her. And she was doing, I think, an extraordinary job of basically pushing him to just feel what he needs to feel in that moment. Like, you don't have to be strong right now. And I think that whoever, I didn't see the comments around, I was looking for him, but like whether a few of those men that you said were saying like, man up, toughen up or whatever. I mean, I think that's how we also get taught, right? Like, I got taught that stuff. And, you know, I don't think anybody was trying to be malicious when they taught me that. It's just the reality of how we kind of grew up, right? And what we have. So, you know, hurt people, man.
You know, and I could hear in the background saying that don't make any damn sense. Something like that, you know, about the work. The reason I ask is, do you see somebody going up to the school and complaining about the amount of work? Is that many of us don't feel comfortable in the school and complaining in the first place. But if it's about achieving or how much work we're doing or whatnot, we might feel doubly not ready to complain about that. We can complain about other stuff, but it just feels like, I don't know that everybody would feel comfortable complaining about the amount of course, the load that your kid has when you're trying to make them strong. Yeah.
But you know what I'll say about that, man? But then I'll build a different conundrum for you then, Chris. I would say, do you feel more uncomfortable going up and complaining about the amount of school, or do you feel more uncomfortable about potentially breaking your child? So you can feel it. Two things can be true. I can feel uncomfortable about going up and having a critique about how much work the school is given, but now I'm painting you a picture of what adulthood can look like for this child if you don't deal with that discomfort right now. And now you got a different decision to make. So do you feel a little less uncomfortable complaining, you know, to your school, right? And that's the question I think that I would ask parents on that piece.
What do you think, though, is for this young man, if he keeps going, he keeps pushing through and he hits all those success markers, what's like some real effect, though, of what you're saying is the trauma that he'll experience on the way there? Is he not right with his own kids?
Right.
I mean, because generally it tells us the more educated you are, the more of a parent you are that pushes your own kids to be, you know, high achievers, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. So what a bunch of the factors that came together in the book for all of the people, right? And most of these folks were fathers, is one, they were deeply insecure about how they were raising their own sons. Like, even though I felt like they were doing an amazing job, they always had this deep insecurity if they were doing enough to protect their child. All three of the men are extremely protective over their children, like overly protective. And there's an instance in the book where this UC Berkeley author, professor, like world-renowned scholar, even weeks before the interview, like a family member says something, like one of the men says something similar to his kid about how he needs to man up. You gave a great example. And he found himself with his hands around that dude's collar, right? Like
Mhm.
he just blacked out, because that's one of the effects, right? It's like nobody protected me, so I'm overprotective of my kid, right? And I'm going to
Mhm.
build a different type of safety net. The other thing that they all dealt with was being able to build real relationships with other adults, mainly like their partner or women, right? So each of the members had a part in their book where they almost like blew up their marriages, right? Because of how hard they were working, their need to succeed. And so they were trying to be better than the absentee person in their life, whether it's their father or a good teacher. And in trying to do that so hard, they were hurting the dynamic of their home at the house. And the other one was all of them felt a deep insecurity around their academic and professional success. So imposter syndrome was on 1,000, right? Because most of these people did well in their schools, and then they got to college and realized, oh, my schools were actually really not good at all. I actually wasn't prepared for this. I wasn't as smart as I thought I was. I'm pretending like, so I'm going to get into this job. I'm not as good as these people, but I'm going to outwork and out hustle everybody. Right. And so those were the three big tenets that came. And I mean, and Chris, this is you, and you and I have a good relationship, man. I'll even be honest and vulnerable for your crowd in a way that I probably wouldn't for most people. I mean, you all have seen this play out in me, you know, just as being a teammate of mine. I am, if I am not able to control a situation, like whether it's the podcast or how we do the show or the type of guest that might speak, right, I get very uncomfortable, right? Because I have to set up these mechanisms in which I'm protecting myself, because I've never been protected before, right? So even to the point where you or Sharif or Ray have to reassert me in the middle of a conversation, like, hey man, we got you. Like, we got you. Like, nobody's gonna let you fall. Or even like with my success, I think that I can end up right back in the shelter if I'm not constantly working as hard as I need to, right? Now, logically, it's like, yo, I can get a job somewhere in this network if things went bad. But in my mind and just my DNA memory, right, that's not logical to me, right? So even though I know the symptoms, right, it's something that I still struggle and deal with because of what it took to get to this place. Does that make sense?
It does make sense.
And I just want to give that vulnerability out there, because I'm not just, it's not just research, right? It's like a Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde thing. Like I'm one of the subjects.
I don't think people pay attention to a lot of the Black middle class or first generation middle class. And their position within that middle class is insecure. You said imposter syndrome. You said the idea of being hungry never goes away. It's like, just because you got steak in the refrigerator today doesn't mean that you don't still feel like you could starve at some point, right? Like those are the type of, so you're sitting with colleagues who don't have that in their mind,
right?
And that's going through your head. That's a tape that plays forever. You and I have talked about this, like, right?
Absolutely.
So I left home at 16,
right?
Started working right away.
Right.
There was a period of time where I lived in a Ford Fiesta. You and I talked about this, right? And I laughed because I had nerve to have roommates.
Right.
I also slept in East Oakland in a Corolla in the back. No, I'm sorry. It was a Supra, Toyota Supra. And there's some that changes in your life when you sleep in the back of the car and you're cold for all night. And you know that there's nobody there. Like it's just you or whatnot. And then you move on. And you do some things in life, you work, you have kids of your own, you're starting to set them up. Now, my children have no idea what that life looks like. And so I guess it's a long-winded way of saying I've come a long way. I have all that still in the back of my mind, right? In the back of my mind, it's still perfectly possible to sleep in the back of a Corolla. But I was interested in when you were just talking about what it does to your parenting, your marriage, and those things too. I feel like it has driven me in some ways to be a much better parent than what I had, right? Like, so my kids are in a protective bubble.
Right.
So I understand when you talk about the family member grabbing him by the collar, right? Like saying like, no, don't do that old shit that y'all did to me.
Absolutely.
Don't do that to these kids, because these kids are free. I have free children, right?
Absolutely.
Like, my children are free. And you're not going to bring that old school shit into our lives, right?
Right.
But I wouldn't have that if I hadn't had, done all the stuff you're talking about, been through some things. Do you think it's possible we take it too far and we coddle?
Oh, I mean, I think it's a constant struggle, right? I think you're constantly dealing with, am I doing enough or am I doing too much? And that line it moves. It's translucent at times. And what I would just say to you and to like, I see you the same way as I see my brother and a lot of these people that I talk about that have kids, right? Y'all are actually excellent parents. Like, you are actually hyper vigilant. You feel things differently for your kids, and you can see things coming in a different way, and you protect them. Now, the people around you might think it's extreme, right? Like, so for instance, if somebody threatens anything that has to do with your livelihood that can put your kids in harm's way, you're going nuclear. Like, it's not, I am about to exhaust everything in my arsenal to make sure that this never happens. That's why you have a UC Berkeley level, intellectual and lecturer, right? Like, about to risk it all and about to put his hands on like somebody, because they are threatening the psychic wall for his children that he's put up. He is trying to protect it, and he has like 4 boys or 5 boys. Like, he's ODing on it, right? And so I think that y'all are doing awesome jobs as parents, but you still have to check in with yourself and make sure you're okay, because you're still dealing with having to pay that price. And also the other thing is, and I didn't talk about it as much in the book, but it's there in everybody, and I assume it's there for you. You get these feelings of unappreciation, right? It's like it's like, yo, I want to provide this for you, but I also kind of need you to know what it took to get here. Like, I need you to really understand. And I think that that's what's made me so empathetic to like elders, right? I think that at this part of my life, I'm more empathetic to elders than ever before. And Chris, this is something that you often say, you brought to my attention, when those shirts came out that I'm not my elders, you'll catch these hands, and just the disrespect in that statement, because you have no idea what those people had to do for you to even be half as free as you are right now. How dare you? Like, the reason you even get to say that and feel like that jumpy and that froggy, you know what I mean, is because it's people that got their asses whipped for you. It's people that like resisted punching back and fighting to get these laws changed to even get us to where we are, so you can have a fighting chance and not have to feel that tax.
Yeah, so Zacchaeus says, I try hard to find a balance, not to coddle too much, but also being firm when necessary. Tashir, and if I'm saying you're wrong, Miss Kim Cosby Thomas, let me know, please. But says finding that balance is hard, especially teaching them self-advocacy when you have always advocated for them. I don't think I'm actually really good in balancing it very much. Right. I think I just went to the other extreme, and I don't want my kids. I don't know if what I'm about to say is exactly how I feel about it, but in the moment, it's the closest I could get to it. I think I don't want them to know any of that life.
Right.
So I think in some cases, it's you want to teach them what you've been through.
Right.
And in my particular case, I just saw success as my kids not even knowing what that's about. Like, some of the stuff that I went through, I just like success for me would be them not even understanding that happens in the world. Right.
Right.
You think that's wrong?
No, I don't think it's wrong. And I actually think that I actually agree with you. I'm not saying that you want them to know. I'm not saying you don't want them to know specific situations, right? Because that's the other thing where my guilt comes in. I did a lot of things that I'm not always so proud of to actually get here, right? So it's not that I necessarily want you to know what I did. It's the level, the amount of hard work that it took, so you can have like a general appreciation that things were done on your behalf. You know what I mean? So like, it's almost like an immigrant story, right? Like, so immigrant parents came to this country so you can have whatever you want to have. And then, then there's usually, you always see the story where it's like that kid is like disrespecting those parents, right? And those parents are like, you only know that great English, and you're talking about my broken English because I came over here on a boat for you. It's almost, we understand that immigrant story a little differently, and like just with that appreciation. That's what I mean. So I don't think I don't want them to know like all that stuff to relive that pain. But I do think that, you know what, a better example is if there are friends that you grew up with or family members that might call you lucky or might say you're privileged. You are like, no, check this out. I don't know. I outworked you. I outworked you. I put myself through pain and struggle, and I resisted a lot of things to get to this point. How dare you? I mean it more in that way.
I want to go back to this achievement trauma tax, though, in terms of the brother who said to this young man up and all that stuff. Just because we are elders in my family, for instance, just because they weren't going to college doesn't mean they weren't achieving, right? So they still had a work ethic that was kind of suck it up. Like my grandfather had 4 jobs at any given time, one regular union job at the Ford plant, but he also did electrical work,
That's a
plumbing
good
work,
job.
whatever. Yeah. I mean, he had that job for like 30 years, got cancer there because they put all the black people in the rooms where you spray stuff and they knew it was giving them cancer. So they put all the black people in there. So yeah, he had a good union job, but the union made sure that all the white folks weren't in that part of the thing. So yeah, so he got a boat out of it, a couple of houses and stuff out of it. He also got cancer and lived with it for 30 years or so, 20 years or so. And I think maybe got a $700-800 settlement. But this is my point, was he used to tell me stories. Boy, if I was born in your time, I'd be a millionaire already. Right. Like, because of the amount of, it wasn't college, but the amount of work that they did without complaining. Now you can see someone like him instilling into my father, something like that. My father instilling it to. So then now, like, I'm in middle generation. I've got kids and I've got and parents, who are living on 2 different social planets. Right. So achievement for the older group was working hard. Right. And not crying about it. Right. Just doing what you got to do. Right. So all this stuff we're talking about right now, trauma and all that, I don't even think was part of the language. Right.
Yeah, I don't think it was either. But I mean, listen, but I don't want us to lose like hard work either. And I know that that's not what you're saying, right? But that's how some people will take it, right? Like that hard work is bad. What we're saying is like that kid needs champions. You know what I mean? Like, so, and I get it. Like in the sacrifice that was a sacrifice of the day for your grandfather. And he was I don't, for all that I know, right? Like, I don't know a whole bunch, so I could be wrong, but what you just described, that was a good man in that time around. You take care of you be there, you take care of your family, you make sure they got some stuff. You know what I'm saying? And like,
bro, let me just tell you one piece of it too, is like, and I don't, just quickly interject. He told me stories like laying railroad track from St. Louis to Montana. And he was making 75 cents a day and the white boys were making $1.50 a day. And he was sending 70 cents home to my grandmother and living on 5 cents a day. Right. And which was enough to get him some bread and Coke or something like that. He'd eat bread, bologna, and Coke or something like that all day, but was sending, and that was considered good money. He left Louisiana, he left New Orleans to get that 75 cents a day. Now, when somebody tells you something like that, and at the time I'm working at JC Penney's and I'm mad about having to take on an extra shift. Right. That kind of
right, exactly. I mean, but this is why I think you and I specifically, I think like, even out of our 8 black cans, I think all of us are kind of tired about this woke culture, this cancel culture, right? But I think you and I are particularly in some ways, right? Because we've gone on and built stuff, right? It's like you've put in that sweat equity, you've worked hard, you've been humbled, you slept in a car, I lived in shelters, like, and that's not to disparage anybody else's story, but now when somebody comes along that hasn't done much, right, and actually is ODing off a lot of the privilege that we kind of help create in that space, right? Like, and kind of saying now get out the way, get out of here. We don't hear that. You know what I'm saying? It's like, oh, you want something for nothing, right? So while I want you to be more comfortable and be more free, like, I need you to understand. You ain't got to understand every little thing that I did, but I need you to understand sacrifices were made on your behalf so you can be this way. And when you have no remembrance of that, that is how you get generational splits. Whereas like this generation just ain't rocking with this generation, right? So every time I see like a white kid say, hey, oh boomer or something like that, like boomer, right? It's like, it's like, come on, bro. You have a birthday every year too, right? Like, that at some point, there's going to be somebody behind you, right? That's going to be coming. And like, and writing this book and doing this research gave me so much more respect for our ancestors. There's a part in the book where I research agency and agentic and being agentic. And basically what agency is for the folks out there is being able to know what you need and having the resources to go get it, right? So academic agency is being able to know how to do that in an academic context, which is what this boy showed. But in doing that research, I saw people from the diaspora, and I did a case study on slavery, right? And in slavery, and we talk about this when we bring up how our people can learn how to read. During slavery, our people who had no language, who had that stuff stripped away, built secret languages through churches called the Invisible Institution. That's what the church was called. And like they built out full languages in the midst of white eyes on them to like plan escapes, like in the sermon, right? Like you can't, like we took the worst parts of the pig and food and all these slops, and now we have delectable dining experiences that white people and people from all over the world come to New Orleans to like enjoy. You know what I mean? Like we have always been agentic, and right after slavery was the highest period of Black people learning how to read ever in the history of like American Black folks, right? Like we are a people that do well when the circumstances are low. And because of that, I think sometimes we are punished, right? Because we always know how to do well with less. Then the zeitgeist just tries to always give you less. And this is where we have to step in and say, look, our people would do the work if it's presented to them, right? We got kids, but you should look at that little boy's story. And if you're in education and you worth your salt, and if you worth your paycheck, you should be going to war on behalf of that little boy because he has the right mindset. He needs us in academia and education to protect him. And that's where we got to step up. And if we don't, we can't complain about a lost generation. We can't complain about mental health. We can't complain about those things, right? If we see that and we do nothing.
Well, what would doing something be though? Like what's the solution? Yeah,
the solution is everybody that saw that video should figure out what this, and you just send it to that superintendent. Like go and support him. Like the lady has her information up from when I was watching your thing. Like, I think there's a ton of educators that's probably reaching out, and I think that little boy would probably end up being okay. I hope so, right? But you people out there, y'all would be so surprised at if Black folks showed up in droves with like a letter writing or email campaign. Public stuff sways education stuff all the time. Every time I'm doing some work in a district and you piss off like white parents in the hills, and then they come down, just like 40 parents, white moms come down and make demands, the district always buckles. It always buckles. Not sometimes, Chris. It always buckles, right? And if people go and look at Dirk Tillison and follow him, right? We did this work together called the Opportunity Ticket, and it was led by Lakeisha Young and the Oakland Reach and Dirk. I did a little bit of stuff, but not as much as those two. And like we put together this thing that allowed Black and brown people, if their school had to close for whatever reason, that they could pick any school in the city that they wanted, charter or traditional, right? And we pushed it, and like we went and we were like there. And then some people started complaining, and then they tried to gut it and say, oh, but neighborhood is the first ranking. It's like, that's the whole purpose of the piece, right? Because those white folks came down and started complaining. Those white people advocated, right? Like they protected.
They have agency.
They have agency. They have agency. Yeah. Across the line agency, right?
Yeah, they agentic AF. Yeah,
they are agentic as fuck.
Yeah,
use my language this early in the morning, right? But I don't. But instead of getting mad at them, right? Instead of like looking at that and being upset, which I am, I also look at it and like, oh, this is how power is going to move. This is how power works. And you can say to yourself, well, I'm Black or I'm brown and I'm poor, so it ain't gonna play out the same. And they want you to do that because what that means is then you don't come out and do stuff. But I've seen the Oakland Reach and Oakland show up and keep showing up, and it changed. Like things actually got shifted, right? It ain't nothing more powerful than like Black parent voices when it's organized and y'all got some cohesion about yourself together.
When I listen to you talk, I think part of what I'm hearing is that just academic achievement is not everything. It's a huge thing. It's a huge thing, and it will get you a lot in life. Right. Especially some material comforts and stuff like that, maybe a better position in life, but there needs to be something else. And when I think about what the something else is, I'm not really clear. Is it like a culture shift? Is it a shift in how we relate to each other? I mean, these things seem, if it is a culture shift in how we relate to each other, that seems undoable. That just seems big. I mean, like, what are we going to have a Black meeting every Saturday and be like, listen, folks, we can't be treating our boys and girls like this. We need to come to agreement on how much of a therapeutic race we're going to be with each other. That seems big. It seems hard to do that.
Well, there's a few ways, right? And so the book that I wrote it for parents, and I wrote it to parents because you have to claim that agency back. You have to. So many Black parents cede their power because they don't feel comfortable correcting the school, or they trust that institution, or for whatever reason, right? And what I'm saying is, whether I don't care if you got a first grade education or a doctor or a PhD or whatever, right? Like, all parents feel this type of anxiety at parts, and you have to push through that and advocate for your child. You have to do that. Like, the number one determining factor is, like, does that child have a champion? That's one. Two, there are other social groups that you kind of have to have around your kid, right? So especially with young Black men, put them in around different groups of Black men, right? That's doing different things. So in one of the cases, right, this mom sent her son to go have dinner because his dad left, but her divorce lawyer would let her son come and have dinner at his family's house. And he got to sit and see this family, and they made them talk at dinner, and they had debates and discussions, right? And then this person eventually actually went and got their law degree. You know what I mean? Because of the exposure to that. Like, there are things that we can do to protect each other and ourselves in this space. I don't know if it's gonna have to be a full cultural shift or whatnot. I don't know if that's possible, but there are things that you can do, like, right now with your child. And I think you do it, Chris. I think you protect your kids. You are a ferocious lion when it comes to your kids. You give them the tools they need for success. And then you also just love them. Like, you allow for a different type of emotional experience than what you were able to have as a kid, right? Like, so you were raising extremely, like, sensitive, like, and emotionally aware young people, right? Which is very healthy. I'm not emotionally I don't have that, and it plays out in very, very rough and tough ways, right? And like I said, I'm being vulnerable, right? I'll be honest, like, you've seen it, you know what I mean? Like, it's like, wait, like, Charles, are you ready to fight right now? Like, what is happening? Like, you know what I'm saying? Or, like, if I feel like I'm working very hard, right? And it's like, and I don't feel like it's matched. It's like, I'm like, I can't get, you've seen it. I can't get words out. I can't make sense at the moment. I have to like you are seeing me in that moment with all my success and all my stuff. You're seeing me kind of try to push through and deal with something. And y'all have had some breakthroughs, right? Where we've, like, had conversations afterwards, or, like, very vulnerable moments, or you've kind of came in like a big brother on those moments. Like, look, man, let me tell you how I'm seeing this, right?
But you know what's a trip about this, though, Charles, is like, there's four of us, for instance, like, in a group, and we're all unfinished.
Right. Exactly.
Like, we all have, like, we're all doing like a home restoration, but it's just personal to ourselves, and it's unfinished. Like, we're like that unfinished basement. We keep working on it, but from the outside, people think, well, the lawn looks nice, you know, the house looks nice, you know, the painting, you know, isn't chipped or whatever, but inside, you know, the basement's unfinished, or the attic's unfinished, and we're all trying to figure that out. I'm trying to do it while also parenting a group of kids, and I don't know that I'm doing a good job on this one thing that I keep returning to this. Maybe it's just because it's working out my own thing, but are we going too far in shielding our kids from what we had or whatever, that we do swing over into a different territory? But right. I know for a long time I was just thinking, I want to make sure that my children don't get imposter syndrome, that they feel like they're about it, period, that they don't walk in any room and feel uncomfortable or feel lesser than, that they don't feel any sense of residue from the, like, you know, not living up to it enough. I don't know what you call it. Like, so to overcompensate for that, you do swing wildly to a different direction. Not everybody agrees with it. Family members don't agree with it, you know.
Well, it's called getting some help, right? Like, we need to heal as a community. We need to heal as a culture, right? Like, there's the reason why, and I know that me and you have talked about this, but you're like, man, you're gonna always just focus on the crack epidemic. I'm like, well, that generation, I'm obsessed with it the same way.
I've been giving you a hard time about this for a while. Crack had been done for about a minute.
But it's the same way that some people are obsessed with with World War II. Right. And the impacts. I just learned that World War II movies are the most made movies of all time, like in American culture. You know what I'm saying? Because it deals with, like, you know, the Holocaust, and deals with what that did to people, and, like, how that forever shifted and changed things. And I think that in our community, I think the crack epidemic did that as well. Like, you know, I think that you have moved on and surpassed that, right? But there are still scars that you have from growing up in that era.
Mhm.
You
Mhm.
were a forgotten generation, and people did not expect the best from you. And I think that, like, you know, we have to also heal from that too. Like, you got some. The point is, when I say this, I'm not saying that just, oh, Charles is just fucked up, right, and dealing with this stuff. I'm saying that all four of us, all of us, right, like, to get to be successful from our generation. If you are, we're the generation that went from being extremely impoverished to being in the middle class, and then we also saw those articles about we also lose our wealth. Like, you know what I mean? So that's a lot of pressure, man. And you feel that pressure. Now, how you deal with that pressure is, you know, we all need to have a case for that. But that's where I would push people into Sean Ginwright's research, right? Which is around healing and what healing actually looks like and how you can incorporate healing in schools. And one of the things that he says that I always remember and I appreciate was, you got to move away from trauma-informed care, because our kids are not trauma. Like, people are not their trauma, right? But if you actually can heal, it's easier to heal children. It's easier to heal young people than it is when they get to be grown and adults. So this is the shift that we need to take, right? So I don't want you doing trauma-informed care on my kid because you only see them as trauma. And that also means that if they haven't experienced trauma, you got to put trauma in them so they can experience it. So that's why you have a lot of people that feel like manufactured victims in our society right now. Because I've shown you that you're only valuable if you got trauma. So,
wow. So that's like it's making trauma attractive to people who don't have it.
Absolutely.
Even if you don't have it. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. They manufacture it, right? It's like, and then they'll tell the story on Twitter, and it's like, well, that story didn't have enough trauma in it, right? So like, we've gotten into this trauma porn like generation, right? Where it's like, how can I be most traumatized and victimized and abused? And like, oh, well, this thing happened 25 years ago. I remember this person yelled at me, and that's the reason why all this is happening in my life, right? And that's what trauma informed is going to get you more of, right? Because it's saying that everything that happens to you is trauma, and it's not, right? There are levels, and that's not to diminish anything that's happened in your life or my life. But what it's saying is we got to learn how to we got to build whole people. And we are not having whole people leave our schools. One, our Black kids are graduating and they're not fully educated, so they're not whole academically. And we've done so much to warp their minds throughout the process, and whether either they're going to be either aggressor or victim and not a person. And so now they're emotionally broken as well. So you got a bunch of third people walking around, a bunch of half people walking around, and then we surprised, but the outcomes that we get.
Yeah, I'm like stuck on this. How do we raise free people? How do we raise free children? You just named a few of the stereotypes that you could be. You could become the super predator. You know, you could become the victim and the traumatized. You could become the sellout. This young man who we saw today could easily be called like, the Carlton. There are all these negative stereotypes you could be or become. But the best stereotype that I can think of is just a free person.
Right.
But you just said a few things, like to be free, you have to be healed.
Right.
You can't be like a teabag steeping somebody in BS their whole lives and then expect them to come out something other than what you've steeped them in. So it seems like the factors are against us.
And
I'm
looking at your comments. Right?
Chioma didn't agree with you, by the way. Chioma says not supporting trauma-informed care is stupid.
I'm
holding her tongue.
Yeah, and what I'm saying is not saying that you don't deal with traumas that young people face, right? That's why I gave you a full framework. Like Sean Ginwright's work is around healing, like how like it addresses the trauma, right? But it also focuses on the person. I'm a full person. I am not just my trauma, right? When you are just your trauma, you grow up kind of the way that I do in a little bit, right? Where it's like everything has to draw back there all the time. So when Chris asked me, are you always gonna talk about crack? Yes, yes, Chris, I am. that's exactly what I'm gonna do, right? Because
you like the all crack, all
I'm never gonna, it's like the Holocaust for me. I'm never gonna let you forget, right? And I think that so to Chioma's point, I just wanted to it's not saying that we don't deal with trauma, but educators that are in teacher colleges now are learning. These are white people, because that's what the majority of the field is, are learning that Black people are their trauma. And I don't need a bunch of new educators coming into the space only looking at me and the broken parts. You know what I'm saying? Like, I need you to how you educate a full person differently than you educate a trauma.
Zakia says, I think he's saying, I think he's saying we shouldn't see Black children simply through a lens of trauma.
Absolutely. Right.
I do like Sean's work it looks like in preference, the work around healing centered
Right.
instead of the trauma informed stuff.
Yeah. And I'll connect you to if you want, because I'm sure he'd love to come on and like talk about it. I'm not doing him it's a full thing, right? So I'll let him better explain it. But I like that there are alternatives to ways in which we address educating our kids. And here's the thing, man. And again, none of this stuff gives you license to not educate. I want to. That's the biggest thing, like that. And I think where we all connect on, like, so saying poor kids can't learn is false. It's just a lie. You know what I mean? And what it also does is it takes the pressure off of you being actually good at your job. You know what I mean? Like, you still have to educate, right? Again, the highest level that we've ever like learned how to read was directly after slavery, when we had nothing, when we were just beaten, when we were the most traumatized as a people. So it's definitely possible. And I just wanted to kind of put that out there. That's
Yahara or Yahira. If I'm saying your name wrong, I'm terrible with names, y'all. Put it in the comments. Put it on a Miss Lopez. Put it in the comments if I'm doing you wrong. She says trauma looks so different in white communities than in Black, Brown, and Latino communities. As a crisis worker, I see more social emotional supports in wealthy communities.
Absolutely.
While in urban communities, it's treated as behavior problems.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
I mean, and I think that it makes sense, right? I mean, it makes sense that I did this work because my background, I came into the field not as a teacher, but as a social worker. That's what I did for 5 years, right? So I look at a situation where I'm aware of all these other factors that's kind of happening, right? But how do I wrap my child in certain services and supports and people to make sure they're getting exposed to a broad range of things, right? So they should be exposed to Chris and his work ethic and the work that he does in education. And maybe they should also see like a basketball coach, or maybe they should see we've taken the ability to dream away from our kids. That's really what this comes down to, right? Like when I was growing up, like the only things that existed was ball player, musician, some type of illegal activity. And I played ball and I was very good at it. And I love ball to this day. But if I grew up seeing a Chris Stewart, like real talk, if I grew up seeing somebody that grew up where I grew up and is running an education like publication at the level that you're doing it, like I would have been like, oh, okay, my eyes are open. Like I wanted to be a sports agent. I tell this story all the time. And I never pursued it because it was Tom Cruise, right? And I can't be Tom Cruise. Like that's like trying to be Batman. You know what I'm saying? So the more that they see us, Chris, the more that they see Black folks being successful in a bunch of various things, I think that's how we start to change this and shift it, man. Like tell kids they can really be what they want to be. Like this is why sometimes and I know it comes out wrong, right? But like when we're like, okay, you know, Black people go teach, right? And it's not, and I think the reason why I react to it some kind of way is because it almost feels like you got to do this or you got to do that, right? And instead of just for me saying, go explore so many different things, let teaching be one, but go kick it with an engineer, man. You might really, really like that. Like go kick it with, you know, the person that runs the sanitation thing or whatever, right? There are people that really love doing that. And so I just want kids to be able to dream, man.
Don't you feel like though people have pushed that for so long? They've pushed STEM, go to college, be a doctor,
right.
You know, all those things as like the, you know, the top end of the top of the key
right.
of everything. And what they didn't do is say, you know, maybe go into education. Like, you know, haven't until the last decade or so been heavily recruited into that. And you know what, you hear me say it all the time. We're like one of the only group of people that turn our kids over to another race every day.
Absolutely.
To educate their brain. So I can see the push of please go into teaching. I can see why that is.
And I can see my flaw, right? When I like have a reaction to it. But I was just trying to show what that's rooted in, right? It's like being driven into something specifically because that's what society says, as opposed to like if you just like to sit around and draw, man, like you can be a cartoonist, man, and you know, you can be Stan Lee, you know what I mean? Like you can do what you want to do, and you can be a girl and do that stuff, right? Like I've seen girls be turned away from things around science and education or art and drawing or whatever the case is, right? And it's just saying, like, let your kids dream and let them explore. The biggest gift you can give your kids is the gift of exploration. And I think that, and I see you doing that with your kids every day. You're like, my kids is Pokemon stuff or they're slime. So I'm just buying slime right now. Like my daughter is playing with slime and she wants to have a YouTube page. All right, well, I guess she got a YouTube page. Let me figure out how to do this for a kid. But what
Bruh.
you're doing is, but
You
you're
don't even know
allowing
the
her.
half of it. You don't even know the half of it, bro. These
But you're-
kids,
right? But think about
Yeah.
that. So how does that make you feel as a father, though, right? To be able to provide that when you probably didn't have that same type of like mental freedom. Now, I ain't even talking about
Mhm.
money and fiscal freedom now, right? Now I'm just talking about mental and spiritual freedom that you're providing your kids, right? Like really sitting there. Maybe you haven't even had the chance to think about it yourself. But like sit back and just with your wife and just say, look at these free ass kids that we raising. Look at them.
yeah.
Now we
I
might
mean,
have
yeah.
to. They might live here a little longer. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
But
yeah.
that's why I bought a big house.
I mean, well, there are times where I look around and think to myself, I'm the only working class person in this household, right? Like somehow I had middle class kids. I don't know how it happened, right? Like I look around sometimes and I just like think half of me still thinks like the old half of me.
Mhm.
And I'm looking at these people who have grown in a different garden. These are different type of flowers than what I was, which makes me kind of marvel at them, look at them and marvel. But I wonder how much class plays a role in everything we talked about today. And, you know, it's
Oh, absolutely.
getting closer to the end here, but you know, I should have brought it up earlier. Just, is there a discussion we need to have about class and how it plays in these things?
Absolutely. I talk about that too, right? Like I talk about this when I give the talks, right? Like class plays a huge role because it lays out different societal norms and rules for you, right? And
Mhm,
the
mhm.
example I give is like a hospital. And in a hospital, when you're poor normally, the conversation beforehand is don't touch nothing, don't ask for nothing, don't break nothing. Do what this doctor say, and let's get the hell up
Yeah.
out of here. We got
Yeah.
stuff to do. I ain't about to
Wow.
pay for none of this stuff, right? Whereas higher class people with more money, with more agency tend to go into those spaces and say stuff like, well, play with everything that you see. Like ask as many questions as you want. That doctor works for you. Like you need to have a relationship with your doctor because we want you to be healthy, right? And then and I'm from a culture that does not like the hospital. I'm from a culture that does not want to go get checked up, right? And I don't,
Mhm.
you know, and that's extremely prevalent in Black men. You know what I mean? Whereas you're seeing people now that's like, no, I'm going to the doctor. Like I'm calling my doctor. Like I'm about to ask my doctor, and like that sounds so foreign to me, right? Because that's not how I grew up. But that's a class thing. You know what I mean? Like because we are taught to not make a fuss, to not draw attention, to not mess up anything. Whereas the reason why the Apple Store does so good is because it plays to that notion of play with everything in the store, break it. We don't care, whatever. Like that's the point. We want you to play with it. We want you to be curious about our stuff. And when you're poor, you're not really allowed to be curious about too many things.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? And when
Mhm.
you're middle class, you can be curious about the stars.
Mhm.
And that's the difference, is the mindset that comes with those. So while you and I are still middle class, at times we might fall back mentally into
Mhm.
being what we grew up as because it's so ingrained in our survival to get to this point. Like you got to follow
Yeah.
a set of rules your kids will never have to follow. And that's hard to
true.
balance.
Somehow my generation got lost in the middle, though. I mean, you know,
Yeah.
and I'm Gen X, so
Right.
so for people to know, somehow we got lost in the middle because we didn't pick up all the skills that my working class family had. Like my grandfather's ability to take apart a motor and put it back together again was just something he would do as a hobby on the side,
Mhm.
right? Like, and I used to marvel at, how do you learn to do all that stuff, right? You know, and if something would break, he had an ingenious way of fixing it, right? So there was an exploratory sense of it. But what his generation did to us was start telling us, you know, doing work with your hands is
Right.
less important than doing work with your mind, right? So we didn't get all those hand skills, right?
Mhm.
And at the same time, a lot of us didn't do the college thing either. So
Right.
we got lost in some middle ground. So I get what you're saying, like with my kids, explore. Let me buy you $30 worth of glue so you can make another batch of slime and just have it
Right.
all around the house and make different colors and have it sparkle
Right.
and all that type of stuff, right? Heather says that the class conversation is so overdue, and I think the way it relates to what I'm saying, and I haven't figured out in this conversation, I want to keep having these talks, is just like, I am obsessed with, are we going too far?
Well, and
Right? Like, are we not doing enough to help kids heal and avoid trauma? And on the other end, are we overdoing it?
I don't know if it's too
pieces
far or
and
not
stuff?
far enough. I think the way in which we do it can be something that we grow in. And I appreciate you having me, man. And I'll come anytime you want me to. And hopefully I didn't hog the mic. But this is the most that, you know, we don't normally have, because it's the four of us and because of the nature of our podcast, we don't really have the opportunity to let things breathe like this. So anytime you want to have these conversations, we can do it. The one thing that I would suggest people go watch that I think is an example of all of this is Chris Rock's latest stand-up special, Tambourine. And Tambourine is basically the confessions of the research of this book. Somebody who came from nothing and got to the complete heights of success, and is like, and those. And then that stuff exploded in adulthood in his 30s and 40s. And like Tambourine is basically the 444 of comedy, right? And like, I think if people go and watch and listen to that, it's funny, but like listen to it in the context that we just placed today, and we'll see what that actually does to somebody over time, right? And like, he's finding his way back, right? He talked about how his marriage devolved. He talked about like raising his kids. And the last thing that he said was, I'm in court and I'm paying for everybody in the court, everybody here to take my money, and I'm the only one that ain't went to college. Like, I'm the, you know what I mean? And it's like, and I think, Chris, when I look at you and knowing your story and what you've built, I see a lot of that special in you, in a sense of, I'm in admiration of of how determined you've been because of what society said you're supposed to do, and like where you've gotten to. And it makes me worry about us as a people. And it's extreme pressure on you. And I don't know what that is to be, but I'm empathetic to it. And I just appreciate being on this show, man, and having me.
Well, I feel blessed with all that I've been able to do and what I've, what God has given me in life, but I don't think it measures up. And it's amazing to me how many people in my life that are younger than me are the people that I really look to, that I think are really doing something, right? Like, so when I look at you, you're living the life that I should have lived in some ways, right? Like, you've achieved the things, like when people achieve academically, like you have a PhD, right? And then you had 2 master's degrees. My entire life, that was the brass ring, right? So I look at so many younger people in my life who are doing the damn thing, and I just like, I'm glad I don't have that generational thing that people have when they feel like you have to be a hierarchical generation, because the people who got the most energy and achieving the most in my life, the ones who I look at and I'm like, damn, that should have been me,
right?
Are people like you, like the people who are like actually achieving what you're achieving. I'm like thinking to myself, well, damn, that should have been me, right? I should have, because I took a lot of off ramps.
Right.
I took a lot of off ramps, and somehow, by the grace of God, still kept getting put back on the on ramp. Not because of anything I did. That's why I say it's by the grace of God. That's why you see me tweet so often, may the peace of the Lord be with you, is because that is my Star Wars, bro. Let me tell you right now, there were so many times I should have been done wrong. And it was like God brought me roses where I thought I was going to have crap. So I appreciate you for coming on. I appreciate everybody who listens to these conversations and sees them as valuable and adds so much. Like, these questions and these comments have made these so much better. Charles, where can people get your book? You should put it up for folks.
Yeah, they can get it. Here, let me
show them what it looks like.
There you go. That's what it looks like. You can get it on off of Amazon. You can get the paperback, or you can get the ebook. And for Patreon members of our 8 Black Hands podcast, I'm actually going to release the audio book in there for free for those Patreon members. And you can go join that at patreon.com/8bh, any level, and you'll get it. I'll try to have it up within the month. But Chris, I appreciate it, man. And anytime, I want to save the vulnerability for you and for your show. But whatever you need from me, man, you let me know. And it's an honor and a pleasure working with you, brother. And I appreciate you all in the space y'all give me, as I am in that phase of paying that tax, as we all are. So thank you.
Yeah, well, I think we got something special. I appreciate it. For the first 3 people that email me at Christopher@activist.com. Again, the email is Christopher@activist.com. First 3 people who email me get a free copy of Charles' book. I will have it mailed to you from Amazon. When it gets to you, make sure to wipe it down and get the Outbreak Monkey stuff off of it. Make sure before you bring it in your house, it don't have the Rona on it. But just email me and it's all yours. Thank y'all so much for listening and watching. I appreciate you all.